At long last, Halo Infinite has been released. 343's efforts since taking over the franchise have been divisive to say the least, with their last title, Halo 5 Guardians, being the most alienating yet. There have been fans of everything 343 have put out, along with a share of critics. Putting that lightly. What they have done so far hasn't been without a fair bit of flaws. From lackluster stories, so-so campaigns, microtransactions, among other things. Halo has been an unfortunate disappointment to many fans, which is why I'm so happy to announce Halo Infinite has absolutely no problems whatsoever. It is the perfect title in every way. Yeah, no, it's not. It's not. But I do enjoy it. Before we go further, know that I've already made 3 videos on the original Halo trilogy. Some of the things I say here will build off from ideas I started in those videos, although it isn't strictly required for you to understand this one. This video will be in similar structure to those, detailing all the changes, so let's get into them. There's some good ones, some bad, all of which you'll have to decide for yourself. Structurally, the campaign has changed dramatically, as it has gone open world. This change allows for a more sandbox approach to combat, while still having a set mission structure most players will follow for its campaign. There are missions that feel like classic Halo, moving you through different locations and sizes of encounters, and having great variety between the encounters, in some of the better ones. Others remind me of the weaker sections from Combat Evolved, having one main visual and just endless samey hallways. Being open world allows for optional content, from boss battles to helping out UNC soldiers, taking over enemy strongholds, captured FOBs, and finding collectibles. Each of these tasks have various rewards for completing them. Rewards include unique weapons, upgrade points, and new items to spawn from your bases. Side activities in this title are all contained to the location. They don't have multiple sections across the map. You jump in, you kill everyone, press a button, and jump out. Which leads to combat. There are quite a few changes here. Overall, it feels a lot faster than previous titles, but shouldn't feel alienating to longtime fans. I'll get right into the biggest change, being abilities. Abilities have a long history in the series, with Halo 2 having invisibility while playing as the Arbiter. Halo 3 introduced multiple single-use abilities. Halo Reach is where they expanded the system to include jetpacks, armor lock, and a lot more. And these aren't single-use, but have cooldowns for them, but you can only carry one at a time. Halo 4 kept this system intact, and Halo 5 changed it to instead give everyone the same abilities at all times. Halo Infinite takes cues from previous games. They have multiple abilities with cooldowns, like in Halo Reach, but instead of having only one on you that you constantly have to swap in and out, you have all 4 of them on you at all times, once you unlock them of course, with new ones being given out throughout the early part of the story. The abilities are the grappling hook and the other ones. Honestly, the grappling hook is the best ability and mechanic in this game. It is multifunctional as it is helpful for traversal and combat. You get to swing around like a 1-ton Spider-Man. Since it isn't a strict grapple to point type of hook, there is a ton of freedom to be found. So it's more like the grappling hook in Titanfall 2 and less like the one in Necromunda, which is great. The grappling hook allows for picking up weapons or coils to throw at people. Attaching to enemies launches you into a melee strike, and this can be made much more dangerous later on. You can even stun jackals through their shield with this as well. Mwah, just perfection. The other 3 abilities do have situations and uses for them, but none are as multifunctional as the grappling hook. The drop wall is mainly helpful for staying back or retreating. Since it is relatively small, you don't get the full coverage like the bubble shield from 3, but this one does let you shoot enemies from one side. Sensor darts are great for finding enemies, but once you get close, the motion detector should take care of that for you. The thruster might be the worst, since if I know I need to move away from where I'm currently standing, I would rather move further than 6 feet, but there are uses for it when you want to flank a nearby or charge an enemy. I would rather they had the repulsor be an ability in the campaign instead of the thruster, because the repulsor is another multifunctional ability that you can use in multiplayer. You can push back grenades, explosives, and enemies. The repulsor can move you as well and can be added with jumps. Abilities can be swapped in and out quickly, which means you can chain together multiple ones to suit your current situation. So even though I'd argue they are limited in their use, there are times when they will come in handy. An oddity I found is that using the defensive abilities while holding a turret will force you to drop it. Although I feel they should only drop when you use the movement based abilities instead. Just a small change I wish they'd make. Given how they handle abilities and it being open world, there are Spartan cores scattered around. These cores are used to level up your abilities and your shields. Don't worry, there isn't some massive skill tree, it's quite contained. It's not strictly necessary for you to do this, but leveling up your abilities has them become more useful. This could be in reducing cooldowns, adding on extra capabilities, or improving the functionality they already have. I think every single ability is greatly improved by leveling them up to the max. Halo Infinite has a major change when it comes to enemies. It joins Halo Reach and ODST in being the only games in the series that don't feature 2 main factions of enemies. The Banished are your new foes. These guys were first introduced in Halo Wars 2, and ever since then I've been waiting to fight them in a mainline Halo title. The Banished are basically a palette swap of the Covenant. I'm not giving the full story, but you know what I'm trying to say. They are composed of the same enemies and there hasn't been any major changes to them. There are some small variations like the linebacker brutes and a return to this Jackal variant from Reach. Overall, if you've played a Halo before, you know how to deal with these enemies. If you haven't, small enemies can be killed with a single headshot. Shielded enemies are weak to plasma damage. I think focusing on the Banished is a smart move for 343, as the Forerunners were an alright enemy, but didn't reach the same levels of greatness as the Covenant, or have the same weird horror found in the Flood. This does end up having the combat feel like there is something missing. You know how to deal with these enemies. We've been doing so for years and several games now. A lot of the fun came from having to change tactics between encounters based on which faction you're facing, or if you're fighting more than one simultaneously. That has now been lost, though robotic enemies help, but not by much. The biggest change for the core enemies may be found in the Hunters. I don't know what drugs they've been taking, but Infinite has by far the strongest Hunters of the entire series. These guys feel like the mini bosses they always wanted to be and have killed me more than any non-boss character in the game. Everyone else feels on par difficulty wise, but those fuckers feel like I actually have to use my abilities and fight carefully or else I'm fucked. Since I mentioned the Hunters feeling like mini bosses, I should speak a little about the actual boss fights in the game. Overall, not bad, probably the best of the series, which is not saying much. The bosses in general fall into the trap of just being a regular dude with more health and deals more damage. The last 2 bosses were the main ones I thought provided the most challenge. Everyone else is pretty basic. Up next, weapons. A lot of them are gone. There are some new weapons added, and some of them don't suck. If you want your gun to have the firing arc of a limp dick, the Mangler is the weapon for you. Vehicles are all subtraction with no additions. There are plenty of them I think would have suited this title sandbox, such as the Mantis or the Revenant. All weapons still follow the same 2-category approach. Clip weapons have clips, obviously, and once those are out you have to pick up more bullets. Battery weapons fire until depleted and will overheat with continuous fire. The battery weapons have a couple of small changes, with you being able to vent them manually before they overheat. Another minor and helpful change is that if you go near the same energy weapon to the one you are carrying with more battery, the game automatically picks it up. There's a new damage type for weapons. Shock damage. It is great against vehicles, This replaces the function that the plasma pistol used to hold, while allowing multiple weapons and even grenades, all of which will disable vehicles hit by it. A neat addition is that they allow you to carry up to 4 different grenade types at all times, all of which are fun to use. The sticky grenades are still king though.
Let them get me.
The open world bosses drop unique weapons, and completing side content unlocks weapon variations you can spawn from FOBs. These unique weapons are much better than the originals, so they are worth getting. There is a lot to like here. Gameplay is incredibly fun. I have played so many open world games, just too many in all honesty, with Halo Infinite being one of the few in recent memory that had combat remaining enjoyable throughout. There is an assortment of ways to deal with any combat encounter. The diverse weapon damages all have uses for them. Kinetic are great for headshots or unshielded enemies, while plasma damage is great for shields. And shock weapons are great for disabling vehicles and sometimes enemies. You have many options available to you to deal with any and every type of encounter you will face, and that's just from a weapon standpoint. Add in different abilities, vehicles, fusion coils, and how all these play off each other, and what you get is easily my favorite Halo from a gameplay standpoint. The open world wasn't as bad as I was expecting it to be. Traversal on foot and in vehicles is satisfying. The map is quite contained in comparison to something like Ass in Creed, where I feel as though they could remove a lot of side quests and chunks from the map and the game would be better without all the fucking filler. Infinite uses the open world alright. There are many small encounters to keep you entertained as you move around, and everything has a purpose behind it, which I have already spoke about earlier on. It never feels as though you have to do everything. If you don't want to, you don't have to. These activities are there as an option for those that want it, while making sure that if you do them, there's a reward for it. I think there should have been better incentives though, because at a certain point you'll have everything you want, and the only reason to do it is for your own satisfaction. I won't get into the whole story in detail, but there are some things I really liked about it. Escharum, hope I'm saying that right, is a great villain because he just seems so fucking excited about the prospect of fighting Master Chief.
I want you to know my name too, to know my legend. How else will you beg me for mercy? I am Escharum, War Chief of the Banished. This is my world now, and you have little time remaining in it.
Chief is this mythical being, and Escharum seems so happy to prove himself in combat against you. He's not some show-stealing villain like
Lady Dimitrescu.
thank you, but he is still a fun villain. It's a simple story with some good intriguing moments, which is honestly all I want. I know others will want more, but I'm not them, so I don't care. Also the weapon, she's just so wonderful. There is some bad news to report though. Some of these problems are pretty minor, I'll admit, but some are quite baffling. The most egregious is the missing features like co-op. This should have been available on launch, but months later it's still not here. I understand, the structure of this game has created many new problems for the devs to face. Adding in co-op to a strictly linear title where you always can control where the players are is one thing. Having co-op being added to an open world title is a way more complex endeavor. So I understand why it's taking them a long time, but I still can't help but feel disappointed. Especially because other titles have done this before. On to the smaller problems. The map has some missing things that would be helpful, like having the option to get rid of the objectives you already completed and having the ability to rotate the map. I don't know why this game doesn't pause while looking at the map. There is only one biome, and most of the enclosed missions take place in interior sections on the ring. This limits the visual variety, as everything just ends up blending together. There are very few standout areas because of this. It's either green open field or interior metallic looking section. The size of them might vary, but the visuals won't. This results in the experience feeling kind of one note. I might recall some particularly awesome thing I did during a combat encounter, but fuck me if I try to remember where it was. The simple combat focused side quest ends up having a lot of copy and paste bases. The only difference between a lot of the enemy strongholds is whatever task they ask you to accomplish, which then boils down to just killing everyone and interacting with some device. Hijacking has been made trivialized with the inclusion of the grappling hook. Before, it was a very position-oriented attack that required you to put yourself in dangerous locations in order to successfully pull one off. Now you just zip to them and that's it. The open world and structure has some oddities. At times, it felt like I was encouraged to explore freely, but there are a couple instances where the game almost wants you to go from story beat to story beat. They rarely exclude you from doing whatever you'd like, even though the characters will ask you to continue with the story. It's weird, because before this game came out, a fully open world Halo wasn't the direction I thought the series would go. Or if it did, I was expecting an approach similar to Gears 5. 343 must have some massive balls or some tiny brains to think Halo 5 pissed a lot of people off. Let's make the next title be open world. Halo Infinite isn't going to be looked at as some kind of new groundbreaking change to open world games, but it is one of the most fun titles I've played, so it can at least have that. The changes to Halo Infinite will not be for everyone, and that's okay. Not everything is going to work for everyone, and I understand how it must feel if you've waited years for a new title and it's not for you. Trust me, I know the feeling. I've been waiting for another great Fallout since 2010, but if you haven't given the campaign a look, I think you should at least give it a chance. I know a small subsection might just look at the changes and think, this isn't Halo. Trust me, it still feels like Halo and is a solid one at that. There are so many directions this series can go from here. One thing I hope for is more spin-off titles like ODST, or anything that experiments with different gameplay types and structures. Halo Infinite was a major risk, and overall I think it worked out. The gameplay is top notch, and the open world has a lot of opportunities for you to fuck around with its fantastic gameplay. Halo Infinite should be looked at as a base for 343, something to build off from and improve. You have great game feel and combat, but you have a quite boring open world with consistent visuals and samey objectives. If the next title is just this, but more, I know I won't be happy, because it needs so much more improvements. The open world needs more to see and more to do. While the combat is the strongest aspect here, you can add more to it, especially on the boss encounter side of things. You can keep a lot of what you did right, but just work on the other things too, because I can tell a lot of hard work and passion went into creating this game, and I know you can achieve something even greater. That will be all from me. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and at some point I'll have to finish up the rest of the Halo games. Until then, I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye. Is it weird to want to fuck an AI?
Of course not.